Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to Intentional Guy. We are on air with Linda Bjork. Did I say that right?
You did.
I'm getting better at it. My wife usually doesn't even let me say my last name because I mess it up. But it is so nice to have you on our show. I was doing some research on you, and I, I really feel very similar to you as far as messages are and what we want to bring out today. And Linda, I don't want to waste a lot of time. I had my wife critique me one time, and she told me I need to talk less. So that that's what my wife, and I was like, I would look back and look, and I'm like, oh, I'm talking over people. I bring you on here because I want to share what God has done in your life. And so I'm going to ask you if you would just start us off by telling us about you, share a little bit of your story with us. I know you've written some books, and I'm all about reading. That's just something very positive to put in our life. So, Linda, if you don't mind, would you mind sharing just a little bit with us?
Oh, absolutely. So, Michael, first of all, I just want to thank you for letting me visit here with you today and to be able to have a chance to share this story. And I love that you brought up the fact that you and I have a similar mission, and that is to help people to be able to become their best selves, to help people
Yes.
to have hope, and to help bring this message that we can live joyfully. And that's really what life is all about. And the interesting thing is this message that I am passionate about comes because of going through some really hard things. Because, you just really value that joy. It becomes a real treasure to you. So
Yes.
for me, my story in growing up, I grew up with really wonderful parents, and life happens. And when I was about 6 years old, my mother experienced a trauma, and it was something that to her just devastated her. And it put her in this state of just really survival mode. And she just kind of turned off, and it was like this wall had risen between us. And as a small child, I didn't recognize and have sympathy and say, oh, my mother is going through a hard time. As a little kid, you have things, you see things from your point of view of how does this affect me and how did
Right.
that, why? And I thought, I must have done something wrong.
Mm.
My mother no longer loves me. She doesn't see me. She doesn't care about me. I am unlovable. And that was the conclusion that my little 6-year-old brain, that was the best I could come up with of why things had changed so dramatically. And so I ended up taking that and using that as a blueprint for my life
Yeah.
of growing up. It's like people don't care about me. I don't matter. I am invisible. So you just make it work. And some interesting things come from feeling like you're not good enough and you're not
Yes.
maybe worthy of love. And that is, you can get really good at sort of creating a mask, a facade, if you will. And that is, Michael, I don't want you to see the real me, because if you
Yes.
saw the real me, you would know, you would discover that I am unlovable and I
Oh,
am
good.
not worth your time. And so, I gotta pretend a little bit and just say, hey, things are fine. And so that becomes the norm. And you just kind of live your life. And I felt broken, but I have to say, you can live your life broken and you can just keep moving forward. And really, you can do a whole lot of things when you're in that state of brokenness. Well, as an adult, then I had a series of experiences that just crushed me. And I'll share just a couple, and it's just really the tip of the iceberg. But one of the things that I have personally experienced is being in an emergency landing in an airplane. We were in a small plane, and the engine literally blew up, and there was smoke pouring out of the cowl. There was oil oozing at my feet. The plane was shaking so violently, I thought that the wings were going to fall off and we were just going to plummet to the ground. And it was obvious that we weren't going to make it to a runway. And I thought, okay, well, this could very well be the end. And I'm trying to be calm. And we found a place to land. My husband was the pilot. He did a great job. He found a frontage road and we landed, and fortunately didn't hit a car, and we were
Wow.
okay, but we were still shaking really bad.
Oh, yes.
And a passerby came and offered my husband a ride to go get, a truck and a trailer so we could take care of things. And I said, perfect, you do that. I'll stay here in case any police come. Well, the emergency vehicles came. I had 1, 2, 3. Pretty soon I was surrounded by 7 of them.
Wow.
And they weren't exactly sure what to do with me because I was okay. So we're just making small talk. And I asked one of them, because I'm trying to stop my shaking, I said, so is this the first time you've picked up a plane on the side of the road? And he said, no, but it is the first time I've seen survivors. And I thought,
Wow.
whoa. And so that did not help stop my shaking. I was still shaking pretty bad. So that was one experience where I, had something scary and traumatic happen. Another time I arrived at the scene of a motorcycle accident in time to see my son's broken body lying in the middle of an intersection, surrounded by flashing lights and emergency personnel. And he should have died, but he didn't. He was bedridden for several weeks. He broke both legs, and he had to relearn how to walk, and that was a challenge. I've also been awoken in the middle of the night with a phone call that my 9-month-old grandson had had a seizure, and he was not expected to make it through the night. And they life flighted him to Primary Children's Hospital, where they did an emergency surgery and drilled a little hole to help relieve pressure off of his brain, followed by another very delicate brain surgery where they gave us about a 30% chance of success to try to clear out a blockage. And they were able to do that and preserve his life, for which I am very grateful.
Yes.
But through this experience, he did sustain brain damage that is still there. And it affects him every day. Right. So I also have another beautiful grandchild who was diagnosed with cancer at 5 months. So we go through things in life that are hard. And I just had a time in my life where there were just a bunch of things that came right after another. And usually we try to deal with things and you move forward. But at this spot with this just combination of things, I didn't handle it well. And I slipped into depression. And it felt like I had fallen into a deep, dark hole. And it was so deep that, Michael, it was like sunlight and hope and happiness couldn't even reach me. I was too far down. And in this place, there were no doors, there were no windows, and I did not see any way out. I thought, well, this is my new reality. From here on out, this is as good as it gets. And not only was there the darkness and the loneliness and the depression, but there was also anxiety and fear. Like my comfort zone collapsed. I did not feel safe, not anywhere and not with anyone. And so I'm in this place of feeling emptiness and darkness and misery, indescribable. Unless you've been there, there really aren't words adequate to describe. But almost no one knew it because I was very good at masking. I had a lot of practice. And so now, instead of just saying, hey, if you knew the real me, you would know that I am worthless and unlovable and da-da-da-da. Now it's, if you knew what was inside of me, you'd know that I'm empty and that I'm miserable. But I'm going to pretend that everything is okay because I don't want you to ask me anything, because I don't want to try to answer. And so, like I said, almost no one knew. And it had been about 5 years. And it's not static, that kind of ebbs and flows and waves. But about 5 years into it, my sister connected with me. And at that time, she was studying to become a life coach. And she said, hey, I've planned this women's retreat. I've rented this condo in the mountains, and I'm going to invite this group of women to come, and I'm going to teach about how to be happy and how to live fulfilled. And do you want to come? And I thought, no, I do not want to come. That sounds horrible, like a torture session, because I didn't want to be around people for day and night for 3 days. And besides, I was stuck in a deep, dark hole with no windows and no doors. There was no hope for me. There was nothing that she could do for me. There wasn't any point. And so I didn't want to go. But the idea wouldn't leave my mind. And so I gathered up all my courage and I went. And I'm so glad that I did, because that decision changed my life. It is very much as if my sister offered a ladder and put it down into my deep, dark hole. And she showed me a way to climb out. And it was very much a ladder. It was not an elevator where a quick press of the button and voila, you are all better. It took time, it took effort, and it was hard. And there were times when I was very discouraged and thought, I think I'll just stay in my hole. I think it'll be easier.
Mm,
But the cool thing is I've learned from my experiences that healing is not like flipping on a light switch.
right.
It's more like a sunrise, where the change is gradual, and from moment to moment, you might not even notice it, but it does come, and it is beautiful. And so, since I have been in this place of darkness and of that just misery, and recognizing, well, how that feels to be so hopeless and to feel so stuck, and then to go through the experience of healing and to be happy and joyful and resilient and to love my life and to just be filled with joy. It's like, yay, today is another day and it's going to be great. And to recognize and know that there are other people who are still stuck in dark holes. And I know what that feels like. And so I want to offer a ladder to anyone who feels stuck in a dark place. And so that is why I do what I do. Like yourself, I'm a podcast host, and mine is called Linda's Corner: Faith, Family, and Living Joyfully. I'm an author. I've written several books. One is called Crushed: A Journey Through Depression, which chronicles my experiences. Another is You Got This: An Action Plan to Calm Fear, Anxiety, Worry, and Stress. Another is 30 Days to a Better Marriage, 30 Days to Alleviate Depression, You Are Good Enough and I Can Prove It. And most of these books are available to download for free on the Hope for Healing website. And Hope for Healing is my nonprofit, where I help to just share tools and resources, lots and lots of free things, free books, free downloads, free audio courses, to help people have that ladder and the tools that they need, so that if they want to get unstuck and to live happily and joyfully, that they can do that.
Wow, that is awesome. As you sat there and told your story, I felt like I was looking into a mirror because I had felt all that in my life. For the longest time, I felt like a throwaway person. And I resonate with you when um, I would see people and it was in my mind all the time. You wouldn't like me if you know who I am. And so I always made fun of myself, cracked jokes, stuff like that before anybody else could say something, because I wasn't going to give them an opportunity to hurt me. I was going to beat them to the punch. And I had this thing that I was not enough, and that for some reason, I was flawed. I could give hope to somebody else, but I could not experience that hope as well myself.
Exactly. We've got this two-way mirror going on, and it's like, Michael gets it. He
Yes.
gets it. You have been there. You know how that feels. And as you and I are talking about this openly, I bet there are a lot of people who are listening who have felt that way but never admitted it, right?
Yes. Yep.
Because like I mentioned earlier, we want to put up that shield that says, I really would like you to like me. So let me do something that I hope you're going to
Accept.
approve of. Yeah, and accept. And so it's tricky, because sometimes then we are not our authentic self, because we're afraid to be,
Right.
because we think that the authentic self is that flawed, chuck away person who's not worth anything. And the thing is, that's not who we really are. What we really are is, we are children of God, and we are full of light, and we are full of potential and all of these wonderful things. But we create these stories that we place upon ourselves, and these images and these I'm not exactly sure what to explain, except we kind of create this alter ego that's not good.
Yep. And I think the church, at least the culture from which I came from, that I grew up in, we didn't really know how to handle depression. We
Oh,
didn't really know how to handle people who were going through depression. And so and plus it wasn't just the church, it was society back then. It had a negative stigma if you went to see a counselor or a psychologist or whatever. And
right.
that stigma is no longer part of our culture really today, but yet you still find people who struggle with wanting to go admit that they're depressed, that admit about their anxiety because it makes them feel less
Oh,
than.
absolutely, because then everyone will know that you're flawed. And I
Yep,
love that you brought up that things are changing. Things are changing as eyes are becoming more open and we're more aware. And part of the reason that we're more aware is like conversations that we're having right now, where
right.
people say, hey, this is actually normal. Because forever, like if I break my leg, there's no shame in that if I go to the
Right.
doctor and I have it fixed. But if I'm having a hard time with something that is not physical, then people think, oh, well, it's all in your head. What is wrong with you? Get a grip. And
Yeah.
so we're trying to get a grip and deal with things by ourselves without reaching out. And it's very hard to be able to do that by yourself. In fact, nigh impossible, I would say.
Yes. And I grew up in a culture where you even heard people say, "Well, you're sinning for worrying. It's a sin to worry. It's a sin
Oh,
to be depressed." And it's like, but as time has gone, we've heard about first there's different forms of depression. It
oh,
could
for
be a
sure.
chemical imbalance, or it could become from a life traumatic event. So everyone's different in that walk. What happened? Like you said, we have no shame if we break a leg to go to a doctor or something else like that. But suicide rates are so high, and doesn't need to be. There are enough resources out there today, but we got to shed the shame and guilt behind uh, depression, anxiety, and understand that, yeah, it's real. It's very real. And
Very
for
real.
me, it was we don't fight flesh and blood, right? We fight a lot of things are spiritual. Some of my depression, yeah, it was a spiritual battle that was going on. And where the battle was because I was lending my ear to the enemy more than I was lending my ear to the truth of who God was. And I got into a great Christian counselor who was able to take the word of God and show me how God saw me and show me that I wasn't a throwaway person, that God wasn't done with me. And it like you said, it didn't happen overnight, but the more I surrendered to it, the quicker it I did heal because I think a lot of times we resist healing when
Oh,
it comes to that.
absolutely. And isn't that funny that we would resist healing? It seems so counterintuitive. Like, of course, I want to be better. And yet, there's something about us where change is very scary. And so it's like, oh, I know what it's like where I am. I know how this feels. It's hard, but I know how it feels. But this is something new. And I don't know how that feels. So that might be really, really scary. Maybe it won't work, and so you have this kind of situation that can go on. In fact, I like to say that every journey to healing begins with hope, and hope is an acronym, and the H stands for a hunger. And to have a hunger is a desire, but it's not just like a little bit of a desire, because everybody thinks, of course, you want to heal, but not really. Hunger is when it reaches a tipping point, and that tipping point is when we want to heal, when we want to change more than we want to stay the same. And we
Yes,
have to be able to reach that point.
yes.
And
And
then,
that's a
oh, sorry.
personal that is a personal thing too. You can't make someone get there.
No,
You
you
can
can't
help. You can
shut
help.
somebody
Right.
off. It doesn't work. And the next part is O, and O is you have to be open. And so that goes along with what you just said is nobody can heal without their own consent. I have to be open to the idea. I have to be open to change. I have to be open to trying something new. And you have to be open to admitting I am not in a good place. I need some help. And to be open to receiving that help. And like you talked about surrendering, we have to be open to allowing that healing to enter. The P stands for positive expectancy, and that is when we're expecting a positive outcome. And you talked about worrying, and worrying is so normal and natural, but worrying is when we are expecting a negative outcome. And having that hope is having expectation for a positive outcome, and that can be really challenging because we believe things because we have evidence that says that it's true. And so we have to get some new evidence. And one thing that I love in the book that you've probably read about the atomic habits is he says the best way to create a new identity, or I'm sorry, the most practical way to create a new identity is to do something different. And so it comes from doing something a little different. And then the E stands for empowerment. And when we're stuck in this place of darkness and being stuck and maybe having a victim mentality or feeling like we're worthless, we feel powerless. Like it is what it is. These are the cards I was dealt. There's nothing I can do about it. And then to realize actually we do have a lot of power over what is going on in our
Yes.
lives. And as we gain that understanding, we gain this power through a combination of learning and doing. And it takes a combination of both because that is how we change who we are and what we do and get that power and realize, it is good and we can make a difference.
Yes. And I love that. I love the acronym there because you have to get to a point where you want hope. You want to believe in it. And for me, when I went to my counselor, I was at that place of brokenness, but I had, like you just said, I had a hunger and an openness to want to be better, to have that joy that I knew was in Christ, but I didn't really know because we only know what we know, right? And
Right.
so if you lit this whole life with it being one way, then I needed to go to someone else because obviously the way I know to do it and the way I've been doing is not working. So I need someone on an outside place that was able to come in and show me all of this so that I could get there. I did want it, but I didn't know how to get there, and I needed someone to speak truth over the lies because at this point lies were overshadowing truth. And even though I knew the truth, to be honest, I knew it. I had a head knowledge of it, but I wasn't having a practical application to me. And so therefore my identity was wrapped around all the worst moments in my life and the worst things in my life. But I chose to let those be my identity. And then all of a sudden I realized, to have an identity in Christ is just to choose it because Christ is there willingly to give it to me. And so but I had to find that journey to that. I was paralyzed. Me and my wife, I say this a lot. We came home every day from work on the weekends. We would get in our pajamas and we didn't get out of them until Monday when it was time to go back to work
Oh, wow.
because we isolated from everybody because we weren't going to give anybody a chance to hurt us or a chance to be thrown away, but
Isn't that crazy?
it is. But then the power of God, thank God he loves us enough that he sends the right people to us and the right relationships to us that helps us to get victory. Like for you, it was your sister-in-law. Was that who it was?
My sister.
Yeah, your sister who invited you to that conference. For me, it was after a car wreck, and a friend of mine said, I need to connect you with this person. And so she connected me to this counselor. And now for 2 years, we have walked this journey together. And I say every time we went to her after I resigned myself to the process, once I gave into that, we and her were having revival every time I came to her office because God was showing up and showing me new things. But she reminded me it's only happening because you are open to letting God show you who he is.
And that is absolutely key, that being open and allowing it. It is critical. We really can't heal without that. I loved how you talked about we kind of have this darkness and this light, and who what we choose to listen to and what we choose to get our identity from. And it reminds me of a story you've probably heard about a Native American grandfather who was teaching his grandson, and he said, "There are two wolves inside of me, and one is anger and hatred and cruelty, and the other one is kindness and love and accepting, and they're battling for control over me." And the grandson says, "Well, who will win? Which one will win?" And he said, "The one that I feed." And so, as we're going through this experience of feeling worthless, like, throw me away, and then we hear stories of God loves me. He sent his son so that he could redeem me. And we have these two wolves, these two voices that speak to us. And so, which one wins is the one that we listen to.
Yes.
And, there's one voice that speaks quite loudly, and that is that negative. And unfortunately, we have a tendency to pick up on that negative, put it in our head, and then I put it on auto repeat all the time. You are worthless. I am not good enough. Da, 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 da. And so I end up feeding that one, or used to, not anymore, all the time. In fact, I would say, like you would comment and try to make sure you cut yourself down before somebody else would do it,
Yes.
and I would say negative things about myself all the time, and I didn't even know I was doing it. I didn't even
Mm.
know. It was so
Yeah.
normal, so natural, so everyday that one time it was my sister again. She said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Do what?" I didn't even know that I'd done anything. She says, "Well, why do you cut yourself down?" And I thought, well, I don't know. It just seems like the right thing to do. And so I think part of the first thing is becoming aware that that's something
Yes.
that maybe we're doing with this negative self talk. And then one way to help stop that, because I know I can't just say, oh, well, just don't do that anymore. We
Right.
kind of have to replace it. And
Mhm.
so there's a saying of, I am the kind of person who is kind to myself.
Mm.
And so, if a negative thought or something that's going to hurt yourself, if you'll stop and recognize, hey, that wasn't very kind. I am the kind of person who is kind to myself. And then I know what kindness looks like. And like you mentioned, we can do things for other people, and we somehow don't think that it counts for ourselves.
Right.
Like the unkind things that I would say to myself and about myself, I would never say to you. I would never say that to you because it wasn't kind, and I'm a kind person.
Mhm.
But somehow I thought that if I said it to myself, well, that didn't matter. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just speaking the truth, right?
Right.
But I was hurting someone, and it wasn't okay. And the thing about when we hurt ourselves, it doesn't only hurt us, because when we're not in a good place, it affects all of the people that we are around. It affects the people that we love, our
Yes.
family, it affects the people at work, it affects the people that we associate with. And there's a saying that a rising tide lifts all ships. And so, as we work on healing ourselves and on lifting ourselves and filling ourselves with light, it also helps and lifts and blesses all the people around us. And so, it's not just about me. It's not just, well, I can serve other people and I can do good in the world that way. But it doesn't matter if I take care of me, because what we do with ourselves matters very much.
Yeah. Well, Linda, let me ask you this. What do you say to the person who's listening to us today that they feel like they're looking at a mirror as we're talking and they see all of this in themselves right now, but they're not where we are in this journey? They're at this point of seeing they're in the midst of being stuck. They're in the midst of being paralyzed. They're in the midst of being, uh, seeing themselves as worthless, depressed, and that's where they're at. What would you say to those people that they can glean from us today and start that path today, that they can actually take today and go?
That is such an important question, because if this doesn't apply to the person in that situation, then our conversation has no benefit beyond you and me. and
Right.
we are here to benefit more than you and me.
Right.
So, for the person who is, I would say, like myself in the past, sitting on the couch, curled up in the fetal position, crying, miserable, feeling like I do not want to endure another day, I would say, I understand how that feels, and there is hope for healing. And also that I trust you that you can do this. And I am not here to fix you because I can't. But what I can do is to invite you and to offer a ladder and invite you to climb out. It takes two parts. It takes someone to extend the invitation, and then it takes the person of their own free will to accept that invitation and to act on it. And so these things matter so much. I'll share just a small little conversation that I had with my sister because this is simpler than we might think. And that is, I had a conversation, and I before this women's retreat started, and I just said, I kind of want to come, but I'm scared because I'm not in a good place. And she said, really? I had no idea. You always look so put together. And then she said, but I understand because everyone thought I had it all together when I was actually miserable inside. But now I am genuinely happy, and it's wonderful.
It is.
So, in this small, simple conversation, she gave me some hope in some ways that I didn't even know that I needed. And one is that she said basically, you're not alone. I've felt that way before. And she didn't judge me for it. She didn't condemn me for it. She didn't try to fix me for it. It was just, yeah, that's hard. And then the next thing is, but now I'm genuinely happy. And
Yes.
so that kind of opened the door just a little bit where I felt so helpless and so stuck in this darkness that there is nothing that makes a difference. And here she's giving me this personal witness saying, I feel happier than I did before. And I'd love to show you how. And it's just, really. And it didn't make me go from zero hope to all the hope in the world, but it was enough to just open a sliver. And that's enough to start. It is enough. Just that little bit of openness to say, you know what? Let's give this a try.
Yes. And I like that. You're exactly right. Just reaching for me, it was telling my wife, I can't continue like this, you know. And and just that there opened the door for someone to help me to get where I needed to be. So I appreciate you coming on here today discussing this because I think, and I know this because I've received a lot of letters. I've received a lot of emails since I started doing this podcast back in April. And I've received a lot of letters from people. I didn't realize how many of us were hurting, how many people were going through this, and how many in the church are there. But I hope today, as people are listening, they hear the hope inside of us. That they see that. But they also will desire that and know that it is real for them. It can be real for them. It's about taking a first step. Just taking a first step that
Right.
gets you to that road. And in today's world, there's a lot of resources out there that weren't there, you know, years ago. But today, especially since COVID, we have a whole lot more resources, a lot more nice thing, online resources that you can get coaching, you can get counseling, you can get help. You don't have to remain paralyzed and stuck or depressed. There is hope out there, and that hope is Jesus Christ. And I hope today that you guys will really listen to this, that you will, I hope as you're listening to it, you also hear the joy that we have today because we took those steps to finding happiness in Christ. And I can't even tell you the payoff to it because the payoff has been huge. And I used to wake up every day saying, I hate myself. And it's so nice not to do that anymore. That was my mantra for years, most of my life growing up. And it may require you have yes, you're gonna have to some people don't go to counseling because they don't want to face what it is because they're afraid it's gonna be painful. And I wish I could tell you, yeah, it's not gonna be painful, but
No, I can't promise that.
it might be painful. But sometimes you have to endure the pain so that you can get past it. And if you trust God, the pain is just for a season with Him, and you will be able to have joy because joy is not meaning that everything in my life is perfect and that I don't have problems. But joy is that in the midst of my struggle, I still have peace in Christ. I still have happiness because my happiness and joy doesn't come from what I do or from what happens in my world. It comes from Christ. And I know that He's in control.
Ah, that is beautiful. There is no greater source of peace and joy and love. And as we're looking for our identity and trying to figure out who we are, who do I want to please? Who do I want to make happy? There are really only two people whose opinions matter, and that is God and yourself. And so, if we have confidence that those two people love, accept, and value us, all of a sudden we change. And then other people who love and value this real, authentic us, they come to us and they gather.
Great.
You know, I
Well,
also loved, if I can, just you
yes.
talked about suffering and how this can be, it's part of the journey, but it can actually be a blessing. I mentioned at the beginning, my story kind of had two parts of feeling broken and then of feeling crushed. And being crushed ended up being a blessing to me. And it was not enjoyable, did not love it in any way, shape, or form. But what it did for me is when I was just broken, I could function, and I probably would have stayed there
Right.
forever. But when I was crushed and it was bad, it's like, I cannot continue this way. I can't. And it brought me to a point where I wanted to change more than I wanted to stay the same. And that is required for part of this changing and healing. And the interesting thing is going through that healing process, not only fixed the brokenness, or the crushed, I'm sorry, but it also fixed the brokenness, where now I don't feel like I'm worthless. I don't feel like I'm invisible. I feel like I have value. I feel like I am worthy and deserving of love. And that is huge. That's something that in years past, I never thought I would experience. And it's really nice.
It is. It is. So, Linda, let me ask you this as we close out here. Where on your website, and what would you recommend on your website, or as far as books that you've written or material that you have for what we're talking about? What would be a great resource for them to go to and look at?
Oh, what an excellent question. We have so many wonderful resources on the Hope for Healing website. But if we're starting talking about this, I have a few resources that fit pretty well. And one of them, I have a free audio course on how to love and accept yourself. I also have my book, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, where you can kind of get that feeling of, I'm not alone, and this is what works, and this is how to heal. And I also have some other free books like You Are Good Enough and I Can Prove It. So there are so many free and very inexpensive resources that are available to help people feel like they matter, because that's so important. When we don't feel like we matter, it's hard to have the ambition to do anything, because it's like, well, it doesn't matter. I don't matter. And what I do doesn't matter. And so it's so helpful if we start with ourselves and building ourselves up. Hey, I matter. I matter to God. I matter to me. And if you look around with your eyes open instead of eyes seeing what you're expecting to see, you'll find that there are other people around who that you matter to very much as well.
Wow. Well, Linda, I really have enjoyed today. I want to invite you back. I would love to just, there's so many topics, uh, it- avenues to take with this that I think would be beneficial. But I'm going to ask my listeners, go to your website. We're going to put it in the description here. Go listen to her podcast. It's all about sharing what we've gone through that others don't, that you can find hope and peace and comfort in it. And I would, Linda, I would love to have you back on our show again so we can discuss some more, especially like the identity. I That was something that was really hard, and it's not something you do. None of this is stuff that happens overnight, but it every all of it is very possible. And finding a new identity and of who you can be versus living an identity from past trauma or negative thoughts, there's hope for that. So I would love for us to dive into that a little bit more. So I'll be talking to you about that. But thank you so much for coming. Any last things you'd like to say before we close?
Oh, just thank you so much for this opportunity and thank you for what you're doing. I love that there are more and more resources like you and like what I'm doing to help spread light because we
Yeah.
need more hope. We need more joy and we need more of that light of Christ. And so it's beautiful. And I really appreciate what you're doing and for you letting me be here today.
Well, thank you again. It's been a pure joy to talk with you today. And to my listeners out there, I hope you're really listening to this and you're hearing what God is speaking to you today through Linda. And I ask you if you'll go look at the description, look at the links that we're going to have in there and go explore it a little bit. Take a look, take 15 minutes out of your time after listening to this and look at some of the resources that are on Linda's site that you can find that will help you in some of the journey that you're in. So until next time, I just want to remind you all keep being intentional. We'll talk to you later.